She was bred like a prophecy and ran like a storm. Ruffian didn't win races. She erased doubt. Cameras adored her. Crowds worshipped her. And on the day America tuned in to crown a queen, destiny blinked. If perfection had a heartbeat, it sounded like Ruffian thundering toward a finish line no one else could see. Look closer. The blueprint was brilliance. Janney bloodlines, a trainer who forged steel from speed, and a filly whose stride read distance like scripture. Gate opens. She detonates. 15 lengths. Record times. Analysts recalibrate the possible. Fans stop asking if and start asking by how much. Every frame turns to myth. But right where victory should be inevitable, the camera catches something else. The fragile cost of greatness. Now we rewind the legend, not to worship it, to understand it. How breeding, discipline, and an unbreakable will built a racehorse that felt more force than flesh. How media turned dominance into destiny. How a single, televised moment changed the sport forever. Stay with me. In Ruffian's rise and heartbreak lies the map, the warning, the wonder, and the truth behind perfection. She wasn't bred to be ordinary. Ruffian arrived into the world with a pedigree that felt like prophecy, speed stitched into bone, courage threaded through blood. The Janney family didn't just pair bloodlines, they engineered possibility. Every decision in her breeding was a wager on greatness. A frame built for stride, lungs built for fire, and the kind of genetics that whisper, break records. Before the world ever saw her blaze down a track, the blueprint was there, a filly designed to outrun fate. From her earliest days, Ruffian moved with a purpose that made breeders and barn hands watch twice. Legs like coiled springs, a top line that promised balance and power, and a pedigree that chimed with proven champions. The expectations weren't timid, they were cathedral high. The Janneys understood what they had, not a prospect, a phenomenon in waiting. She didn't just run, she attacked the horizon. In the paddock, Ruffian didn't chase, she claimed. Precocious speed met competitive fire, a temperament that refused second place. Handlers spoke about her focus, ears locked forward, eyes that read distance like destiny, a will so clean and relentless it felt like a new element of nature. Even at a walk, she carried the urgency of a racer hearing the bell. Greatness needs guardians. Under the Janneys' patient stewardship and Frank Whiteley Jr.'s uncompromising philosophy, Ruffian's raw power was shaped into discipline. Whiteley believed in truth through work. No shortcuts, no softness, just the honest grind of miles and muscle. He didn't polish a jewel, he forged a blade. Together, owner and trainer built a path where her talent met structure, a narrow bridge between brilliance and risk. And when she finally stepped onto the track, it wasn't chance. It was the inevitable consequence of vision, breeding, and a heart that refused to slow. Ruffian's rise wasn't an accident. It was the product of discipline, design, and destiny. From the moment she stepped onto the training grounds, her workouts carried an intensity that made seasoned horsemen pause. She wasn't just fast, she was relentless. Every conditioning regimen was a test of her will, and she passed with a kind of fury that turned routine gallops into statements of intent. Gate schooling, often the undoing of young horses, became her stage. She broke clean, straight, and with a force that seemed to erase hesitation itself. Frank Whiteley Jr. demanded discipline, and Ruffian absorbed it like oxygen, sharpening her raw power into a weapon. Her mornings were filled with long gallops that stretched her stride and built endurance, paired with sharp breezes that honed her explosive speed. Trainers spoke of her focus, ears pinned forward, muscles coiled, eyes locked on the horizon. She didn't just train, she rehearsed greatness. When Ruffian finally debuted, the racetrack witnessed something closer to revelation than competition. She didn't win. She annihilated. 15 lengths separated her from the field, a margin so vast it felt like she was racing against shadows. That first race wasn't just a victory, it was an announcement. A phenom had arrived, and the sport would never be the same. Her early times weren't whispers of promise, they were thunderclaps. Ruffian equaled track records, shattered expectations, and forced analysts to recalibrate what was possible for a filly. Each stride seemed to bend the clock, each finish line another reminder that she wasn't simply competing. She was redefining the limits of speed and dominance. Ruffian's breakthrough was more than a beginning. It was the ignition of a legend, a moment when training met destiny, and the world realized it was watching a force of nature disguised as a racehorse. Ruffian didn't just run, she commanded. Her style was a fusion of raw physiology and unshakable psychology, a performance that made her look less like a competitor and more like a force of nature. Every stride was a declaration, every race a demonstration of dominance. From the moment the gates opened, Ruffian was gone. She didn't ease into pace, she detonated. Her break was so clean and violent that rivals were left chasing dust before they even found rhythm. Jockeys who rode against her often admitted they weren't racing with Ruffian, they were racing behind her. Her stride was poetry in motion, long, fluid, and devastatingly efficient. Analysts marveled at how she covered ground with minimal wasted motion, her legs slicing through air like precision instruments. It wasn't just speed, it was biomechanics perfected. Her frame allowed her to sustain blistering pace without faltering, a gift that made her look untouchable. But Ruffian's edge wasn't only physical. She carried a mind that refused compromise. Once in front, she dared the field to catch her, and they never did. Her ears locked forward, her eyes burned with focus, and her will was absolute. She didn't know how to yield. That refusal to surrender became her hallmark, the trait that transformed her from a champion into a legend. Ruffian's racing style was more than speed. It was domination sculpted into motion. She broke like thunder, moved like silk, and carried the psychology of a warrior. In her, physiology and spirit fused into something rare, a creature who didn't simply win races, but redefined what victory looked like. Ruffian's career was a storm of dominance, a streak so pure it felt mythical. She didn't just win, she obliterated. Each race became less about competition and more about witnessing inevitability. Fans didn't ask if she would win, but by how much. Her march through the Acorn Stakes, Mother Goose Stakes, and Coaching Club American Oaks was a coronation. Each victory added another jewel to her crown, each margin another reminder that she was rewriting the script for fillies. These weren't narrow triumphs, they were demolitions, often by double-digit lengths. Ruffian's dominance was measured not in photo finishes, but in yawning gaps. 15 lengths, 10 lengths, 8 lengths, numbers that turned rivals into footnotes. She didn't just cross the wire first, she crossed it alone, leaving silence in her wake. Time itself bent to her will. Ruffian equaled or shattered records with a stride that seemed untouchable, Analysts struggled to contextualize her speed. Was she the fastest filly ever, or simply a new category of athlete? Each clocking reinforced the sense that she wasn't racing against horses, but against history. Her unbeaten streak wasn't just a statistic, it was a phenomenon. Crowds came not to see a contest, but to witness a spectacle, a filly who turned racetracks into theaters of inevitability. Ruffian's victories were less about competition and more about revelation. The sport had found its queen, and she ruled with margins so vast they felt like destiny itself. Ruffian wasn't just a racehorse, she became a cultural phenomenon. Her dominance on the track demanded headlines, and soon the press transformed her into a living myth. Every victory was splashed across newspapers, every stride replayed on television, every margin of triumph exaggerated into legend. She wasn't simply covered, she was celebrated, elevated into a symbol of invincibility. Sports writers ran out of adjectives. Unbeatable, machine, queen of the fillies. Ruffian's name became shorthand for perfection. Television networks began to feature her races, turning what had once been niche coverage into national events. She was no longer just a filly. She was a spectacle America tuned in to witness. Crowds didn't just cheer, they worshipped. Fans traveled miles to see her run, children carried her picture, and adults spoke of her with reverence usually reserved for human champions. She embodied hope, pride, and the thrill of witnessing greatness. Her aura extended beyond racing. She became a cultural touchstone, proof that beauty and power could coexist in one creature. Ruffian's image transcended the track. She was marketed as a legend in the making, her victories framed as destiny fulfilled. Commentators compared her to Secretariat, but with a sharper edge. She wasn't just fast, she was flawless. The media didn't just report her story, they mythologized it, turning her into a brand of invincibility. Ruffian's rise in the media wasn't accidental, it was the natural consequence of her dominance. She became more than a horse. She was a national obsession, a living metaphor for perfection. And with every headline, every broadcast, every fan's gasp, her legend grew larger than the racetrack itself. By 1975, Ruffian wasn't just a champion, she was a phenomenon. Her unbeaten streak had turned her into a national obsession, and the media hungered for a spectacle that could test her invincibility. That spectacle became the match race against foolish pleasure, the Kentucky Derby winner. It was billed as the ultimate showdown, the queen of the fillies versus the king of the colts. The idea of a match race carried enormous weight. It wasn't just another contest, it was a duel, a clash of titans staged for television. Networks promoted it as a once-in-a-lifetime event, and the public responded with feverish anticipation. Ruffian's dominance had made her seem untouchable, but the question lingered. Could she defeat the Derby champion head-to-head? Behind the scenes, owners, trainers, and broadcasters wrestled with logistics. The Janneys were cautious, aware of the risks, but the lure of proving Ruffian's supremacy was irresistible. Frank Whiteley Jr., her trainer, knew the dangers of match races, the strain, the spotlight, the unforgiving pace, yet even he couldn't deny the pull of history. The stakes weren't just about victory, they were about legacy. On July 6, 1975, Belmont Park became a cauldron of expectation. Tens of thousands filled the stands. Millions tuned in on television. The air was electric, charged with the sense that something monumental was about to unfold. Ruffian, sleek and powerful, carried the weight of perfection on her shoulders. Foolish pleasure, steady and proven, represented the challenge. It wasn't just a race, it was theatre, a national event, staged under the brightest lights. The match race was more than competition. It was destiny colliding with danger. Ruffian stood at the edge of immortality, her unbeaten record daring the world to believe she was invincible. The stage was set, the stakes were absolute, and the world held its breath. The match race was meant to be Ruffian's crowning moment, the duel that would etch her name into eternity. But destiny, so often her ally, turned cruel. As the gates flew open, she broke with her trademark explosion, ears pinned forward, stride devouring the ground. For a brief electric instant, it looked like another chapter in her invincible saga. Then, tragedy struck. Mid-race, Ruffian's right foreleg shattered, the sesamoid bones splintering under the strain of her relentless drive. The sound was muffled, but the sight was unmistakable. Her stride faltered, her rhythm broke, and the Queen of the Fillies was suddenly fighting against her own body. Millions watching on live television gasped as the impossible unfolded before their eyes. Her jockey, Jacinto Vasquez, tried desperately to pull her up, but Ruffian's warrior spirit refused surrender. She kept running, driven by instinct and will, worsening the injury with every stride. Track officials and veterinarians rushed to her side, the crowd stunned into silence. What had been a celebration of greatness became a tableau of horror. In the hours that followed, surgeons fought to save her. The operation was long, meticulous, and filled with hope. But Ruffian's indomitable spirit betrayed her. Even under anesthesia, she thrashed, trying to run, undoing the delicate work. By dawn, the decision was unavoidable. The filly, who had never lost, was euthanized, her undefeated record preserved, but her life cut short. Ruffian's breakdown wasn't just a tragedy, it was a national trauma. The match race, meant to immortalize her, became the moment that defined her legend in heartbreak. She had run herself into history, and in doing so, revealed the fragile line between glory and ruin. Ruffian's death was more than the loss of a racehorse. It was a national heartbreak. The filly, who had embodied perfection, collapsed before millions of eyes, and the shock reverberated far beyond the track. America had watched her rise, believed in her invincibility, and then witnessed her fall in real time. The grief was immediate, raw, and collective. When the decision was made to end her suffering, it felt like the end of an era. Ruffian was laid to rest in the infield at Belmont Park, her head pointed toward the finish line. A symbolic gesture that ensured she would forever face the place where she had reigned supreme. Her grave became a shrine, a place where fans and horsemen alike came to honor her memory. The match race had been broadcast nationwide, and the tragedy unfolded live. Viewers who tuned in expecting triumph instead witnessed devastation. Newspapers carried headlines of sorrow, and commentators spoke with hushed reverence. For many, Ruffian's death was their first encounter with the brutal risks of horse racing, and it left scars that never fully healed. Her breakdown ignited fierce debates about the ethics of match races, the strain placed on young horses, and the balance between spectacle and safety. Critics questioned whether the pursuit of entertainment had cost Ruffian her life. The industry faced uncomfortable truths, that glory and danger were inseparable, and that the sport's brightest stars carried its darkest risks. Ruffian's aftermath was not just mourning, it was reckoning. She became a symbol of both greatness and fragility, forcing fans and professionals to confront the price of pushing athletes equine or human, to their limits. Her grave at Belmont was not just a memorial, it was a reminder that perfection can be fleeting, and that legends are often forged in both triumph and tragedy. Ruffian's story did not end with her burial at Belmont Park. It began a legacy that reshaped horse racing and cemented her place as one of the sport's most unforgettable icons. Her brilliance and tragedy became inseparable, ensuring that her name would echo long after her final stride. Within a year of her death, Ruffian was inducted into the National Museum of Racing and Hall of Fame, 1976, a rare honor for a horse with such a brief career. The Ruffian Stakes at Belmont Park was created in her memory, ensuring that every summer her name returns to the racing headlines. Her grave at Belmont remains a pilgrimage site, a quiet reminder of both her glory and fragility. Her breakdown forced the racing world to confront uncomfortable truths. Match races, once popular spectacles, fell out of favor, seen as too dangerous and exploitative. Conversations about veterinary care, track safety, and the ethics of pushing young horses to extremes gained urgency. Ruffian's tragedy became a catalyst for reform, sparking debates that still shape the sport today. Experts consistently rank Ruffian among the greatest American racehorses of the 20th century. Though her career was short, her dominance was absolute. 10 wins, all by commanding margins, and no defeats until fate intervened. She is remembered not just as a champion filly, but as a phenomenon who redefined expectations of what a female racehorse could achieve. Ruffian's legacy is a paradox. She is celebrated for her invincibility, yet remembered for her fragility. She remains a symbol of both the heights of equine greatness and the risks that come with chasing perfection. In every retelling, Ruffian is more than a horse. She is a legend, a cautionary tale, and a reminder that brilliance often burns brightest before it fades. Ruffian's story has lived on not only as history, but as myth. Over time, her name became shorthand for invincibility, her races retold with the glow of legend. Yet behind the myth lies a truth that is both more human and more haunting. Ruffian was not a machine, but a living creature, fragile even in her brilliance. The numbers tell one story: 10 wins, all decisive, margins that dwarfed her rivals, records equaled or broken. But the narrative that grew around her, the perfect horse, the unbeatable queen, sometimes obscured the reality that every stride carried risk. Her dominance was real, but so was her vulnerability. Ruffian's tragedy revealed the razor's edge of greatness. To push beyond limits is to flirt with danger, and her breakdown was a stark reminder that even the most extraordinary athletes are bound by biology. Her will to win, her refusal to yield, became both her defining trait and her undoing. What makes Ruffian unforgettable is not just her victories, but the arc of her life. Bred for greatness, trained into dominance, celebrated as invincible, and lost in a moment that exposed the fragility of perfection. That arc resonates because it mirrors the human condition, our pursuit of glory, our denial of limits, and the heartbreak when brilliance burns too bright. Ruffian's myth is the story of a horse who seemed untouchable. The truth is the lesson she left behind, that greatness is never without cost, and that legends are often forged in both triumph and tragedy. Her name endures not because she was flawless, but because she embodied the fragile beauty of striving for the impossible. She came like a prophecy and left like a lesson. Ruffian's thunder silenced doubt, then taught us the cost of worshipping perfection. At Belmont, her grave faces the finish line, so she's forever running, forever almost there. We remember the margins, the records, the breathless awe, and the hush that followed. Her story is not defeat, it's devotion, risk, and the fragile beauty of trying to outrun limits. If greatness is a flame, she was its brightest flare. Carry her forward gently, honor the wonder, heed the warning, and let her heartbeat echo every time the gates fly open into tomorrow's silence.